It's the best time of the year. No, Jason, it's not Christmas time. It's fantasy football time. This is the Fantasy GOAT. Let's go. Welcome, kids, to the Fantasy GOAT. I'm Mike Davis. That's Jason Feinberg. Jason, this is all about being the greatest of all time in your own fantasy league at home. That's what we're going to be talking about all season long here. And Jason, I mean, it's really about competition, camaraderie, and complaining. The 3 season, you're good at all 3 of those.
Yeah, especially complaining.
Yeah.
But I like the touch with the kids, because kids is a baby goat, right? We'll be calling everyone kids,
right?
Unless you grow up, everybody like us at some point, and then we call you ladies and gentlemen. But until then,
we're just going to stick with kids, which is going to be great. And this is the show where you're going to be geared up to become the GOAT of your own fantasy football league. Now, Jason, the first thing we got to talk about here is the livestock component to this show. That's where we talk about trending topics, all those types of things that are the hot button issues that everybody needs to know. So as we're heading into week 1, the big thing, Cooper Kupp, okay? I drafted him in your league. And
First round.
I'm already saying prayers to the heavens above because I am worried.
Well, in one of my leagues, I have somebody that not only took Cooper Kupp, but also took Travis Kelce.
And what is the latest on him? And that's bad.
Questionable.
Okay.
Questionable.
So he's questionable. That's a big issue with Cooper Kupp. You know,
he's out for week 1.
We know he's out. I'm already worried about the whole issue with potentially them tanking and looking to maybe do that natural progression of Caleb Williams from USC going straight to LA.
It would make perfect sense.
It really would. I'm worried about it, but we'll see what happens. The other big issue, Jonathan Taylor, Indianapolis. We know all the issues with him and owner Jim Irsay. What's your feelings right now on Jonathan Taylor as we're heading into the season?
Well, the problem with Jonathan Taylor is he's not just diluting one team. He's diluting at least 2 teams, because of course Indianapolis, we already know the situation there and with Irsay. So we're trying to figure out who's going to be the running back if he does or doesn't play. There already is a pretty big backfield.
Right.
But then there's still a chance that he could go to Miami. And then what do you do with those guys, like a Mostert or a Wilson, who was out for the first 4 weeks, A-Chain?
Right.
So now 2 teams. I say maybe stay away.
Yeah, I would definitely stay away. What's your feelings on Jackson or Hull? Are you big on those, the guys who could be taking up that playing role and that time in Indianapolis? Deion
Jackson has at least some experience. We've seen some stuff that he's done, and he's done a pretty good job. I like him because Evan Hull, from what I've heard, he's a great runner, but if you touch him, he goes down. So he has no yards after the touch.
Well, us Northwestern guys, we're sensitive.
Yeah, right.
When you touch us, we fall down. But I actually like him. He might be a good sneaky pick.
All right.
Big bone to pick with you, though. Here, we're talking about league strategies, the way leagues are, constructed. You're an IR. You're not an IR guy. I'm an IR guy.
Yeah.
Leagues with IR and not IR. I'm upset at you that none of your leagues have IR spots. How can you do that to fantasy managers?
You got to put on your big boy pants, all right?
Okay.
IR is like a participation trophy. This was what we did when we were dealing with COVID, and it was basically for COVID. But before that, I don't ever remember using IR. So now that we're pretty much gone with the whole COVID thing, we're back to, here's the deal. If your player is good enough, then you got to keep them. You got to keep them on your bench, and you got to make that decision.
The 2 guys we just spoke about, Jonathan Taylor and Cooper Kupp, now if you have them on your team and you're in a Jason Feinberg league, there's nowhere to go.
It depends, and that as a commissioner, that's where it gets really cloudy, and that's why I don't even like IR, because I have to constantly babysit the 11 other teams, because they'll try to sneak somebody into IR when they're not really IR.
See,
they're just hurt.
You and me are never going to agree upon this. I think this is East Coast, West Coast, Tupac, Biggie. I mean, I grew up on the East Coast, and we always had these IR spots, so I don't know what you're doing. But guys, coming up, we're going to be going into GOAT Vision. Those are the players we want you to watch out for. We got QBs and RBs on the way. But before that, we, of course, have some GOAT history for all you kids at home. Here you go. In week 1 of 2015, this running back shined in prime time, rushing for 168 yards and 2 touchdowns to become the week's top RB. After the break, we'll give you the answer. Welcome back to the Fantasy GOAT. Kids, as we left you last, we were talking GOAT history. Jason, this was the question. In week 1 of 2015, this San Francisco running back shined in prime time, rushing for 168 yards and 2 touchdowns to become the week's top RB. I thought it was Frank Gore. No, Carlos Hyde.
No, Carlos Hyde. I loved him until I didn't. And it was mostly because he was either injured when I needed him or I had one of those crazy 100-yard bonuses.
Yeah.
And they got me 99.
See, Carlos Hyde, I had a team named Run and Hide, but he's just one of those fantasy guys, a plug-and-play guy, won you a couple weeks. Always liked him. But now, let's do a deep dive for our GOAT Vision segment. We're talking about the QBs and the RBs that we love, Jason. Let's start with you. Let's start QBs.
Yeah, for sure. These are the ones I'm really going to be looking at closely in week 1. Jalen Hurts, Justin Herbert, Anthony Richardson, Bryce Young, and Russ Wilson. 2 of them I'm really going to be looking forward to seeing are, of course, Jalen Hurts, because who knows? Maybe he could have a hangover from last season from the big game. Also, he has lost his offensive coordinator. Even the backfield, we're not too sure about who's going to be the running back.
Should I be taking this personally?
You love him.
Philadelphia. He's my man crush, but okay, continue, because I'm going to get into that.
Well, my man crush isn't even playing, so
yeah.
And then, of course, Bryce Young, he was the first pick in the draft.
Right.
So I think all eyes are going to be on him to see how he does. And not only from a fantasy perspective, but also from, just the game itself.
Yeah. Here's why Hurts is going to have a big year. First of all, they had one of the easiest schedules last year. Now they're going to be challenged way more. He wasn't even playing a lot in the fourth quarter last year. I know he loses Steichen, who's now in Indianapolis. Shout out to UNLV. He was a quarterback there. But this is going to be a big deal for Hurts. They got to have that momentum from the big game. They're going to be challenged more. They're going to be throwing more. He's got great people around him. And sure, the running back situation's a little different. It's not one guy in Miles Sanders, but when you got Penny, Gainwell, and Swift, it's all great stuff.
I hope for your dad's benefit that you're right, because I think you helped your dad with the draft and took him in probably the second round.
He wanted him. He wanted him big time. I had to help out Pops with that.
Yeah.
Okay, I also love Anthony Richardson as well. I think Steichen going to Indianapolis is going to help this guy. 4th pick of the draft, 6'4", 250 pounds. He can run. He can throw. This guy is going to have the entire team on his back. Plus, with no Jonathan Taylor, it's going to be exciting what's going on there. But let's go into, speaking of mobility, let's talk about running backs. Where are you at there?
All right. So I first of all, I want to congratulate you on your newest name, Bijan Mustardson.
Right. Which is officially, that's Bijan's actual, he has an actual mustard line that you can buy online. So I didn't make it up. So don't give me that much credit. Bijan, it's nice.
Well, of course, he is one of the running backs I'm looking for. He was also a top draft pick for Atlanta. So really want to see, A, how good he is when he's on the field, and B, they have such depth at running back. Will they use him as much as fantasy football players hope they use him that took him in the first round? And then also, a guy that did really well for me last year from New York is Breece Hall until he got injured.
Right.
Man, he was fast and he was agile and good. So I'm hoping that he can stay on the field, and he has to work with Dalvin Cook,
which I'm scared about. So that's why, I kind of stayed away from him in the draft. For me, I kept going back to Saquon Barkley. I mean, just look at the dude's thighs. Come on. I wish I had Saquon's thighs. This guy is the motor, the engine of that Dable offense in New York. You got to love Saquon. So I'm big on him. I'm big on Nick Chubb. But, Jahmyr Gibbs, the other big running back from the draft. The last time Detroit drafted a running back this high up in the draft, it was in '89, 3rd overall, when they took Barry Sanders. So when you dump Jamal Williams, who was always in the end zone, when you dump DeAndre Swift, this guy's going to be getting a lot of, carries, a lot of volume. David Montgomery's there as well in Detroit, but I'm still very big on Jahmyr Gibbs. So a lot of good stuff there. Coming up, we're going to be getting into wide receivers and tight ends. But, of course, we have another GOAT history question for all you kids at home. So here's the question. In week 1 of 2006, this New York wide receiver soared past Tennessee, totaling 153 yards on 8 catches to become the week's top wide receiver. After the break, the answer to that GOAT history question. Welcome back. All right, kids, let's dive into that GOAT history. So here was the question, Jason. In week 1 of 2006, this New York wide receiver soared past Tennessee, totaling 153 yards on 8 catches to become the week's top wide receiver. Who was it? Lavernius Coles. I mean, come on, Jason. One of the best names ever. If Stephen and Lynn Davis named me Lavernius instead of Mike, where would I be?
You would probably be making a gold record.
I would.
Probably R&B.
R&B,
Yeah.
cover of a platinum record.
And your brother would probably be named Shirleyus, so it's Lavernius and Shirleyus.
I love that.
Mm-hmm.
He's gonna
and
love
Bubukidius.
He's gonna love that you said that. All right, so let's do this. Wide receivers and tight ends. Let's talk about the guys that I'm in love with. So obviously, Justin Jefferson, Amon-Ra St. Brown, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and Jackson Smith in Jigba, the rookie. Now here, let's start with this. Amon-Ra St. Brown in Detroit. I love this guy. His name, it means Egyptian sun god. His father also named his brother Equinemius.
Right.
We know him in Chicago. But Amon-Ra St. Brown, the volume, the way this guy can perform in PPR formats, you got to love him. I'm big on him. I'm big on Detroit this entire year. So I didn't get lucky enough to draft him anywhere, but I'm going to be trying to trade for him all season long. Now, we also got to talk in Philadelphia. A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, my guys, swole and skinny Batman. These guys, they're going to be getting a lot more targets, a lot more big-time moments late in games because, like I said earlier, Jalen Hurts was, a guy who wasn't challenged as much with that easy schedule. So this time around, Jalen's going to be throwing those passes, fourth quarter games. They're going to need to score. I'm big on them as well.
Yeah, and from a fantasy perspective, it's so great that Jalen pretty much already knows his A and B, or 1 and 1A, whereas a lot of teams, we're still trying to figure out who the alpha is going to be and who's going to get those fantasy points.
100%. Where are you at?
Okay, so I'm going to be looking at Garrett Wilson, Devontae Adams, Chris Olave, DJ Moore, and the Baltimore wide receivers.
Yeah.
Obvious, like I just mentioned, we don't know who's going to get the ball quite yet. But Garrett Wilson is my new man crush.
Really?
Before it was Cooper Kupp, but now,
Does this have anything to do with Hard Knocks? No.
No. In fact, I haven't watched 1 second of Hard Knocks.
Really?
Yes. So this just goes back to last season when I thought he was awesome. So I really am going to be paying close attention to him, and I do have him in a couple leagues.
Plus, if there's a big difference between Aaron Rodgers and Mike White throwing you the football.
And he did really, really good with those guys.
Yeah.
And then let's bring it home to Las Vegas, Devontae Adams. I mean, this guy isn't getting drafted as early as he has in the past, and it probably has to do with the fact that he's on his third quarterback. Look, a lot of guys have had a lot of quarterbacks, but this is like the third, pinpointed, targeted quarterback that he's going to be playing with.
Can Garoppolo get the ball downfield to him?
Right.
That's my question. That's why I'm not as high on him as I am on Diggs and other guys that are going around that time.
Yeah.
I think Carr throwing the ball downfield was a little bit more of his strength to get that ball to Devontae, but we'll see. I mean, he did work in the slot well in Green Bay as well. But now let's dive into tight ends. So, I mean, listen, tight ends, in fantasy football, it's like the haves and the have-nots, and you want to be part of the haves, right? It's all about Travis Kelce. We know, there's a little bit of that bang up early in camp, but it's Travis Kelce. It's death, taxes, and Kelce. You gotta love him. But the guy I really want to pinpoint for everybody, especially since we're here in Las Vegas, I mean, Dalton Kincaid. This guy was the 25th pick of the draft. A local guy, went to Faith Lutheran. I love him, and I love his pedigree, okay? He had to walk on not only at San Diego's and then go to Utah, but this guy, I mean, he's got that basketball pedigree. Let's think about tight ends who've had amazing success in the league and what their pedigree looked like. Antonio Gates, Kent State. Tony Gonzalez, Cal. Jimmy Graham, the U. Dalton Kincaid was a hoops player primarily before football. He played AAU. He won championships here in Las Vegas. So he really didn't have much time on the football field. He was more of a basketball guy. And if we see anything, the court translates to the field. I'm big on Dalton Kincaid. I know Dawson Knox is also there.
Right, he's there.
But maybe they're going to do those 2 tight end sets. Maybe he's going to be the new favorite target, and Dawson Knox is kind of more of a traditional tight end doing the blocking, and Dalton's out there running more Kelce-type routes. So that's my big man crush when it comes to tight ends.
The ones I'm going to be looking for, Darren Waller, Evan Ingram, Chiga Okonkwo, Kyle Pitts, and Sam Laporta.
Say that one more time?
So here's the thing. In fact, let me bring that up. Let me bring that up.
Chiga.
This is why I love him so much. When I'm the commissioner and I'm doing the stickers on the board, every single time I get to correct the person that is trying to say Chig Okonkwo's name. Chigoziem Okonkwo from Nigeria.
Do you usually have that with hot sauce or ketchup?
You know what? He's good without anything.
Okay.
Yeah. Look, he already has a vanilla offense in Tennessee. So, yeah, I wasn't even going to talk about him, but let's just make him one of them. And the other one is Kyle Pitts with Atlanta, because I think people have a short-term memory, because a lot of people are picking him up. Picked him up in the draft pretty early. Do you remember last year? He didn't do squat. I mean, he was a good player on the field because he was blocking, but
do we remember who his quarterback was?
Was it
Mariota? Couldn't get him the ball.
Yeah.
His rookie season, he had over 1,000 yards receiving. Listen, I don't want to keep going back to the well. I don't want to keep going back to the girlfriend who proves to you that you shouldn't be with her. And that might be Kyle Pitts for me. Maybe it's the girlfriend I should stay away from, but I love this guy. Okay. I mean, he's talented. Not only is he from Philadelphia, but listen, if they could figure it out with Desmond Ridder, you got to give him a shot, right?
Got to give him a shot. I'll let you do it.
We'll see what happens. All right, coming up after a short break, guess what? We know how we feel about fantasy football. How do former players feel about fantasy football? Coming up after the break, we're talking to Kassim Osgood. You don't want to miss that. The Fantasy GOAT is back after a short break. Remind me, Jason, did you play professional? Oh, you did not play professional football. No, but we know how we feel about fantasy football. But didn't you always want to know how professional players feel about fantasy football?
Absolutely.
I always wanted to know.
There's the ones that love it, and they're the ones that make our lives miserable.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, Kassim Osgood, former player. Let's see what he thinks about fantasy football.
And fantasy football is a great way to utilize those tools you have. It sort of keeps you attached to the locker room. It keeps you involved in the game. Because when you transition from football, it's like a huge part of your life that you're now giving up and going to do something else. And to fill that void, you kind of have to find ways to keep yourself, moving and doing something. And I think fantasy football is a great avenue for us to get out those energies, that competition, that competitive nature. You still have an avenue to sort of express that part of yourself.
If you had to help fantasy players at home, what would you say? What are some of the things that a former player would know that you would like to impart on a serious fantasy player?
The best way to evaluate players is to understand what the coach's philosophy is for that team. So are they defensive-minded head coach? Are they offensive-minded head coach? Who are they playing against? Then you go back and look at the former games that those teams have played against each other, and you see the history of the stats. Did they run the ball a lot on third down? Third to short, what was their pass game looking like? On defense, were they in prevent a lot? Do they have double coverage, zone, man? Who are they playing? Is it a fast receiver? Do they double cover them? Things like that are sort of little small nuances that can kind of help you get a better idea as to how your player is going to perform that day. And you look at the health history of your guy. Is he a healthy guy? Is he a smart guy? You assume that he's done his playbook, done his homework. And is he going to be prepared for this team? Is he an emotional person? How does he react on Twitter to people contesting his abilities?
All right, so that's Kassim Osgood. Great guy right there. Now, coming up, Jason, after this short break, my favorite part of the show. That's where you and I go mano-y-mano. It's the GOAT lineup, ladies and gentlemen. We'll tell you all about that when we come back after the break. Welcome back, kids. Okay, so this is the best part of the show, my favorite part of the show. It's the GOAT lineup, Jason. This is where you and me go head-to-head each and every week. We're going to be going over the rule book now so everybody at home understands. So this is how it works. You and me go head-to-head each and every week. We're choosing players at the QB, RB, wide receiver, and tight end slot. So 4 players. Now, we can't use that player more than once. So if you use, Amon-Ra St. Brown once, you're never using him again.
Okay.
So we're just going to tally up using standardized fantasy football scoring, all each of our lineups, and whoever scores the highest at the end of that week is going to be, 1-0 or something like that. And at the end of the season, we're going to see who is the GOAT of the Fantasy GOAT show. Look at that.
All right.
I already decided. This is the big thing. I mean, we're going to be definitely giving one of us a goblet or a champagne glass filled with goat milk. So we'll be drinking that on the show once that happens.
I'm lactose intolerant. I think I can do it.
Oh, so you can't do it. So you're already lost.
All right, we'll figure something out.
You already lost. But before we get into the punishments for the losers, let's get into our lineup. So who are you choosing for Week 1 GOAT lineup?
Week 1, Seattle's Geno Smith because he's up against Los Angeles.
Okay.
Jamal Williams because there's no Kamara. George Pickens, because he had a good preseason, and Tyler Higbee with Los Angeles because Cooper Kupp is out.
All right, see, a lot of good strategy there. I'm definitely going to have to piggyback on the Jamal Williams at some point. This is what I'm doing week 1, kids. So quarterback, I'm going Sam Howell.
Okay.
He's going against Arizona week 1. I think Eric Bieniemy there. It's just going to be a firepower offense. I like a lot of what's brewing in Washington. I'm also going to do Alexander Madison in Minnesota. No Dalvin Cook, so he'll get a lot of volume. I wanted to go 1 star off the gate, right off the top. So I'm doing CD Lamb in Dallas because I want to get off to a 1-0 start.
Plus Lamb, Goat, it's kind of nice.
Similar, same domesticated animals.
Right.
And lastly, tight end Evan Ingram. I like all the positive momentum there after signing the contract in Jacksonville.
Yeah, I like him too.
Those are our GOAT lineups. We're going to see what happens next episode. But before we let everybody go, all the kids home, put them to bed, let's talk real quickly about the punishments. What is your selected punishment for yourself if you should lose?
I figured that since we're, taping here in Las Vegas, what better way to be punished than by putting on one of those heavy showgirls headdresses. I'd wear it all show, which I've never actually put on before, but from what I hear, they're very hard to balance and very hard and very heavy.
Okay.
And it's going to be a complete disaster because not only should men like me not be wearing these headdresses, but I also don't have cleavage. See what I mean?
No, I have no clue what you're talking about. I spaced out there. I chose a little bit different of a punishment for myself. Producer James, he said, you know what, there's this trend out there. How about you lock yourself in a diner and you have to be there for 24 hours, but every pancake you eat, it takes 1 hour off the top. So if you have 12 pancakes, you only have 12 more.
I'll bring the roll.
So we'll see. I'm going to do that. I'm loving it. Good luck, my friend.
All right, good luck.